Captain Ryan Mitchell was drinking his morning coffee when the sensors on his ship started screaming. The Aurora had been exploring the outer edge of the solar system for 3 months, mapping asteroids and testing new engine designs. Nothing exciting ever happened out here, which was exactly why Ryan liked it. But today was different. His console lit up with signals that made no sense. Mathematics poured across the screen in patterns that were too perfect to be natural. Someone was trying to talk to them. Ryan called his crew to the bridge. Dr. Lisa Crawford arrived first, still wearing her pajamas and looking annoyed at being woken up. She was the ship's expert on languages and communication, though she had never expected to use those skills for anything beyond human dialects. When she saw the patterns on the screen, her annoyance vanished. Her hands moved quickly over the controls, pulling the data apart and putting it back together in different ways. After 2 hours of work, she looked up at Ryan with wide eyes. This was a message from aliens, and it was written in a way that any intelligent species could understand. The translation took 3 weeks. Lisa barely slept during that time, surviving on coffee and determination. The message was an invitation. Somewhere out in the galaxy, there was a group called the Galactic Council. They governed 47 different alien species, managing trade and peace across thousands of worlds. Earth had finally been noticed, and the Council wanted humanity to join them. The message included a massive database of information about galactic civilization, laws, and expectations. It seemed like a dream come true. Back on Earth, the governments went crazy with excitement. Presidents and prime ministers held emergency meetings. Scientists analyzed every piece of data from the alien database. The United Nations created a special committee to handle humanity's response. Ambassador Jack Peterson was chosen to lead the human delegation. He was a career diplomat who had spent 30 years negotiating peace treaties and trade deals between nations. Now he would speak for the entire human race. But Lisa kept reading the database, and the more she read, the more worried she became. She made lists and charts tracking patterns in how the Council operated. Every species that joined had to follow strict rules. They had to share their military information. They had to accept Council oversight of their economy. They had to let Council inspectors visit their worlds whenever they wanted. The newer species always got the worst deals, while the older species controlled everything. Commander Kate Sullivan ran Earth's defensive systems. Her job was to keep the planet safe from asteroids, solar flares, and anything else space might throw at them. When Lisa shared her concerns, Kate started her own investigation. She looked at the Council's history, focusing on what happened when species resisted their rules. The pattern was clear and frightening. Economic sanctions came first, cutting off trade and technology. If that did not work, the Council sent peacekeepers, which was just a nice word for soldiers. Within a few generations, every resisting species was brought in line. Admiral Chris Hayes commanded Earth's small fleet of military ships. They were designed to protect cargo vessels and explore new areas, not fight wars. When Kate showed him her findings, he ran simulations on what would happen if Earth joined the Council and then wanted to leave. The results were always the same. Earth would lose its independence within 20 years. Humanity would become workers and soldiers for species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. All of Earth's resources would flow outward, and humanity would get very little in return. President Nicole Davis had the hardest job on Earth. She had to decide whether humanity would accept the Council's invitation. The pressure was enormous. Many people wanted to join, excited by the promise of alien technology and the chance to explore the galaxy. But the reports from Lisa, Kate, and Chris told a different story. This was not a partnership between equals. This was a trap disguised as an opportunity. Nicole called a secret meeting of world leaders. She shared everything her team had discovered. The debate lasted for 3 days. When the vote came, it was unanimous, but not in the direction anyone expected. Earth would decline the invitation. Humanity would remain independent. But Nicole knew that simply saying no was not enough. The Council was used to getting what it wanted. Earth needed to make its position absolutely clear in a way that could not be misunderstood or ignored. She authorized a plan that had been developed in secret over the past decade, waiting for exactly this moment. Ambassador Jack stood before cameras that would broadcast his message across the entire planet and out into space. He wore a simple suit and spoke in a calm voice, but his words carried the weight of humanity's future. He thanked the Council for their invitation and acknowledged the honor they had shown Earth. Then he explained that humanity had studied the Council's history and structure carefully. Earth appreciated the offer, but had decided to pursue a different path. Humanity would remain neutral and independent. Earth would not join the Galactic Council now or at any point in the future. The galaxy responded with shock and confusion. No species had ever declined the Council's invitation before. Some aliens thought it was a negotiating tactic, a way to get better terms. Others believed humans simply did not understand what they were rejecting. The Council sent follow-up messages, offering better deals and making promises. Jack politely but firmly declined each one. Earth's position would not change. Then came the second part of Jack's announcement, the part that made every species in the galaxy stop and pay attention. Humanity was not just declining the invitation. Earth was declaring its solar system to be sovereign territory. Any ship that wanted to enter needed explicit permission from Earth's government. Any attempt to force entry would be considered an act of war. And to back up these words, humanity was deploying a defensive network that would make any invasion impossible. The broadcast ended with a simple statement that echoed across 100 worlds. Humanity thanked the galaxy for its interest but politely requested to be left alone. Earth would defend itself and its right to choose its own destiny. The message was clear, direct, and completely unprecedented. In a galaxy where joining the Council was considered inevitable, humanity had just said no. General Dan Foster watched the construction yards from his office window. They floated in orbit around Earth, massive structures that glowed with welding torches and assembly drones. Humanity had been building these facilities in secret for 15 years, hiding them behind asteroids and using stealth technology to avoid detection. Now that Earth had declined the Council's invitation, there was no more need for secrecy. The yards were working at full capacity, producing the most ambitious defensive system any species had ever created. The project was called Sentinel, and it consisted of exactly 1,000 autonomous defense platforms. Each platform was the size of a small city, a sphere of metal and weapons that could think and fight on its own. They were being positioned in a perfect geometric pattern around the entire solar system, creating a boundary that nothing could cross without permission. General Dan had spent 10 years planning this network, running simulations and testing prototypes. Now it was finally becoming real. Dr. Amy Richardson was the genius behind the weapons systems. She had started her career studying fusion reactions, trying to find better ways to generate power. But her research had taken a different direction when the government asked her to weaponize her discoveries. She succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. The platforms carried plasma cannons that could melt a battleship in seconds. They had gravitational disruptors that could tear a ship apart from the inside. And they had something Amy called cascade missiles, weapons that could jump from target to target, destroying entire fleets in a chain reaction. But Amy's greatest achievement was not any single weapon. It was the coordination system that linked all 1,000 platforms together. They used quantum entanglement, a physics trick that let them communicate instantly across any distance. If one platform detected a threat, all 1,000 platforms knew about it in the same moment. They could coordinate their fire, share sensor data, and respond to attacks faster than any biological crew could react. The Sentinels were not just weapons. They were a single organism with 1,000 eyes and 1,000 guns. Each platform broadcast a warning message in every language humanity had discovered in the alien database. The message was simple and direct. This solar system was sovereign territory of Earth. Any ship that approached the boundary needed to request permission and wait for approval. Any ship that crossed the boundary without permission would be destroyed immediately. Any fleet that showed hostile intent would be eliminated before it could reach the inner planets. The message included tactical data and simulation videos showing exactly what would happen to ships that ignored the warning. Lieutenant Sophie Brooks commanded Platform 7. She was 28 years old and had been in the Space Force for 6 years. Most of that time had been spent on routine patrol missions that never saw any action. But now she sat in the command chair of a weapon system that could destroy a small moon. Her crew consisted of just 12 people. The platform's artificial intelligence handled most operations, but humans made the final decisions about when to fire. Sophie took that responsibility seriously. The platforms had been deployed for only 3 weeks when the first test came. A council ship appeared at the boundary, its sensors sweeping across the defensive network. Sophie watched it on her screens, tracking its movements and analyzing its weapons. It was a Vrexian vessel, medium-sized but heavily armed. The ship sent a message demanding that humanity cease its illegal fortification and submit to council inspection. The tone was arrogant and assumed that humans would back down when faced with real authority. Sophie sent a response following the protocols General Dan had established. She identified herself and her platform. She repeated the boundary warning and gave the Vrexian captain 30 seconds to turn around and leave the solar system. The timer counted down on her screen while her weapons officer powered up the plasma cannons. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. The Vrexian ship continued forward, crossing the boundary line. Sophie did not hesitate. Platform 7 fired a single shot, but not at the Vrexian ship. The plasma bolt crossed 50,000 kilometers in 2 seconds and hit an asteroid that was roughly the size of Earth's moon. The rock exploded in a flash of light that lit up every sensor in the system. Pieces scattered in all directions, some of them vaporized completely. The Vrexian ship stopped moving forward. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then the ship's engines flared to life and it reversed course at maximum speed, fleeing back toward Council space. Sophie sent a final message to the retreating ship. Platform 7 thanked the captain for his cooperation and wished him safe travels. The sarcasm was probably lost in translation, but it made Sophie's crew laugh. They had just won humanity's first confrontation with the Galactic Council without firing a shot in anger. Within hours, the footage of the destroyed asteroid was being broadcast across every Council world. Humanity's warnings were not empty threats. The Council convened an emergency session. Ambassador Zireth, a diplomat from the Corvian species, led the discussion. He had been negotiating with alien species for 3 centuries and had never encountered a situation like this. Young species were supposed to be eager to join the Council, grateful for the opportunity to learn from their elders. They were supposed to be weak and dependent, needing Council technology and protection. But Earth was none of those things. Humanity had developed weapons that matched or exceeded Council military capabilities, and they had done it in isolation. The debate went on for weeks. Some Council members argued for immediate military action. Earth's defiance could not be tolerated. If humanity was allowed to remain independent, other species might get the same idea. The entire system of galactic governance could collapse, but other voices urged caution. The Sentinels were more advanced than anything the Council possessed. They used quantum communication that could not be jammed. They could track every ship within light years, and there were 1,000 of them, all working together with perfect coordination. Military Coordinator Thexus reviewed the tactical data and gave his assessment. A direct assault on Earth would result in massive casualties. The Sentinels could destroy any fleet before it reached the inner planets. A blockade might work better, cutting off human expansion and waiting for economic pressure to change their minds. But even that approach had risks. Humanity had shown remarkable ability to innovate and adapt. They might find ways to break a blockade or simply outlast it. Back on Earth, Colonel Alex Turner monitored all Council communications. His intelligence network had been built over decades, using spy satellites and encrypted transmissions to track what the aliens were saying. He reported directly to President Nicole Davis, giving her real-time updates on the Council's debates. What he found was both encouraging and concerning. The Council was afraid. They had expected humanity to be primitives who needed guidance. Instead, they had encountered a species that was technologically advanced and absolutely determined to remain free. The standoff continued for months. Council ships approached the boundary regularly, always stopping just short of the Sentinels. They performed sensor sweeps and ran tactical drills, clearly trying to find weaknesses in the defensive network. Sophie and the other platform commanders watched these maneuvers carefully, updating their response protocols and running their own simulations. The Sentinels never powered down. They watched the darkness with electronic eyes that never blinked, waiting for the moment when words would not be enough and actions would speak louder. The Council fleet arrived without warning on a Tuesday morning. 200 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took up formation just outside the Sentinel boundary. They were arranged in a perfect combat formation that had been used successfully in 100 previous conflicts. The message was clear without words. The Council was done talking and ready to enforce its will. Admiral Megan Hall watched the fleet from her command station on the orbital defense platform Providence. She had been expecting this moment for months. Megan had served in Earth's Space Force for 20 years. She had commanded cargo escorts and exploration missions. She had trained countless pilots and officers. But she had never faced a situation like this. 200 alien warships against humanity's defensive network. If shooting started, thousands of people would die in the first few minutes. Her job was to make sure that shooting never started. She opened a communication channel to all Sentinel platforms and gave them strict orders. Watch but do not fire unless fired upon. Humanity would not throw the first punch. The Council fleet commander was a Vrexian named Admiral Keltos. He had fought in 18 campaigns and never lost a battle. His tactics were studied in military academies across Council space. He sent a message to Earth that was broadcast on all frequencies. The message demanded that humanity power down the Sentinels within 12 hours and allow Council inspectors to board them. Failure to comply would result in the fleet taking necessary action to ensure galactic peace and stability. The language was formal and polite, but the threat was obvious. President Nicole Davis read the message 3 times before responding. She consulted with her advisors, military commanders, and scientists. Everyone agreed on the response. Earth would not comply with the demand. The Sentinels would remain active and defensive protocols would remain in effect. Nicole recorded her response personally, speaking directly to Admiral Keltos. She acknowledged his impressive military career and respected his dedication to his duty. But Earth's position had not changed. The solar system was sovereign territory and the defensive network was non-negotiable. Dr. Ben Clark had been studying Council military tactics for years. He was a strategist who specialized in predicting enemy behavior. When he saw the fleet formation and analyzed the timing of their arrival, he made a prediction. The Council was not planning to attack. They were attempting intimidation. They wanted humanity to back down without fighting. It was a show of force designed to avoid actual force. Ben explained his reasoning to Admiral Megan. The Council had positioned their ships in a way that looked impressive, but was tactically inefficient. If they really planned to attack, they would have spread out more. Lieutenant Sophie Brooks received new orders from Admiral Megan. All Sentinel platforms were to begin Phase 2 protocols. The platforms had been operating in passive mode, watching and waiting. Now they would demonstrate their capabilities more clearly. Sophie input the commands and watched as Platform 7 came fully online. Every weapon system powered up simultaneously. Targeting computers locked onto the nearest Council ships. Energy readings spiked as the plasma cannons charged to full capacity. All across the defensive network, 1,000 platforms did the same thing at the same moment. The Council fleet detected the power surge immediately. Every sensor on every ship screamed warnings. They were being targeted by weapon systems far more powerful than their initial scans had suggested. The quantum coordination meant that destroying one platform would not help, because all the others would still be operating. The tactical computers on the Council ships ran probability simulations. The results were not encouraging. In a direct confrontation, the fleet would lose at least 60% of its ships before reaching the inner planets. That was an unacceptable casualty rate. Admiral Keltos sat in his command chair and reviewed the data. He had been told that humanity was a primitive species with limited technology. The intelligence reports had been wrong. Very wrong. The defensive network was more sophisticated than anything the Council military possessed. The quantum communication alone would take Council scientists decades to replicate, and the weapons signatures suggested power outputs that should not be possible for a species that had just discovered faster-than-light travel. He sent an urgent message back to Council headquarters requesting new orders. On Earth, Colonel Alex Turner intercepted the message before it reached Council space. His intelligence network included quantum receivers that could pick up transmissions across vast distances. He decoded the message and forwarded it to President Nicole. Admiral Keltos was asking for permission to withdraw. He cited unexpected defensive capabilities and recommended a diplomatic approach instead of military action. The Council's show of force had failed. They had blinked first, but the Council's response was not what Keltos wanted to hear. The elder species refused to authorize a withdrawal. That would make the Council look weak. Instead, they ordered Keltos to maintain his position and continue the standoff. They would send negotiators to open diplomatic channels while the fleet remained in place. It was a compromise that satisfied no one. The fleet would stay but would not attack. Earth would not back down but would not fire first. Two sides locked in a stalemate that could last months or years. Captain Tyler Wright commanded Platform 42 on the far side of the defensive network. He was 35 years old and had spent his entire adult life in space. He understood the psychology of standoffs better than most people. When nothing happened for too long, people got careless. Routines became boring. Vigilance faded. That was when mistakes happened. Tyler proposed a solution to Admiral Megan. They should remind the Council fleet that humanity was not getting bored or careless. Admiral Megan approved Tyler's plan, which was called Protocol Escalation. All 1,000 Sentinel platforms would perform a synchronized demonstration of their capabilities. It would not be an attack or even a direct threat. It would simply show the Council fleet what they were really facing. Tyler coordinated with the other platform commanders, timing everything perfectly through the quantum network. When he gave the signal, every Sentinel in the defensive network acted as one. 1,000 platforms powered up to maximum output simultaneously. Their weapon systems locked onto every single ship in the Council fleet. Targeting lasers painted each vessel, highlighting weak points in critical systems. The tactical data was transmitted directly to Admiral Keltos, so he could see exactly how the battle would unfold. His fleet would be destroyed in less than 4 minutes. The simulations showed every ship's destruction in detail, calculated by computers that never made mistakes. The message was mathematical and undeniable. The Council fleet held its position for another 6 hours. During that time, Admiral Keltos received frantic messages from his ship captains. Their crews were terrified. Being targeted by 1,000 weapons platforms was psychologically devastating, even when no shots were being fired. Several ships reported crew members requesting transfers or early retirement. The morale of the fleet was collapsing under the pressure of facing an enemy they could not defeat. Finally, Admiral Keltos made a decision that would define his legacy. He sent a message to Council headquarters stating that he was withdrawing the fleet for tactical repositioning. He did not wait for permission. His ships powered up their faster-than-light drives and jumped away from Earth's solar system. Within minutes, the boundary was clear. The standoff was over. Humanity had won without firing a single shot in anger. Lieutenant Sophie Brooks watched the last Council ship disappear from her sensors. Her crew cheered and celebrated, but Sophie felt only relief. They had come within hours of a war that would have killed millions. The Sentinels had done their job perfectly. They had been threatening enough to deter attack, but disciplined enough to avoid starting one. She sent a message to all platform commanders congratulating them on their professionalism and restraint. Back on Earth, President Nicole Davis addressed the world. She explained what had happened and thanked every person who had worked on the Sentinel project. Earth was safe and independent. Humanity had faced down the Galactic Council and proven that freedom was worth defending. But Nicole also warned that this was not the end. The Council would not forget this humiliation. They would look for other ways to pressure Earth. The Sentinels would need to remain vigilant. The price of independence was eternal watchfulness. The news of the Council fleet's withdrawal spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species heard the story in different ways, filtered through their own media and propaganda. But the basic facts remained the same no matter how they were told. Humanity had said no to the Galactic Council. The Council had sent a fleet. The humans had not backed down. The fleet had retreated. For species that had lived under Council authority for generations, this was unthinkable. It changed everything. The Delthians were the first to follow humanity's example. They were a young species, only 200 years into their membership with the Council. Their homeworld was rich in rare minerals that the Council needed for advanced manufacturing. For decades, the Delthians had watched most of their resources flow off-world, while receiving very little in return. 3 weeks after the Council fleet left Earth's solar system, the Delthian government recalled their Council ambassador and began building defensive stations around their planet. The Zentari came next. They were miners and engineers who had joined the Council hoping for better technology and trade opportunities. Instead, they found themselves locked into contracts that heavily favored the older species. When the Council proposed a new trade agreement that would give them direct control of Zentari mining operations, the Zentari government rejected it publicly. They cited Earth's example and declared their intention to renegotiate their Council membership terms. The elder species were outraged, but could do nothing without looking like bullies. Captain Luke Harrison commanded the Pathfinder, humanity's first dedicated deep space reconnaissance vessel. His mission was to explore beyond the solar system and make contact with other species. 6 months after the standoff, Luke received a coded transmission from Delthian space. It was an invitation to meet secretly with members of their resistance movement. Luke knew this was dangerous. If the Council discovered the meeting, both species could face consequences. But he also knew this was an opportunity humanity could not ignore. The meeting took place on a neutral space station near the border between Council and independent space. Luke brought engineer Claire Davis with him. She was an expert in propulsion systems and energy generation, the kind of practical knowledge that other species wanted. The Delthian representatives were 3 scientists and a military officer. They asked the question that Luke had been expecting. How did humanity develop such advanced technology while staying isolated from the Council? Claire explained that Earth had taken a different approach than most species. When humans discovered something new, they did not stop there. They kept asking questions and pushing boundaries. Council species tended to accept the technology they received and use it exactly as instructed. Humans modified everything, trying to make it better or faster or more efficient. This constant innovation had led to breakthroughs that the Council had never imagined. The Delthians listened carefully and took detailed notes. They wanted to apply the same principles to their own civilization. Back in Council space, the elder species faced a crisis they had not anticipated. 3 more young species followed the Delthian and Zentari examples. They did not leave the Council completely, but they began asserting more independence. They rejected unfavorable trade agreements. They demanded seats on important committees. They formed coalitions to vote as a bloc on Council decisions. The careful structure of galactic governance that had existed for 10,000 years was starting to crack. Councillor Vrenna was one of the few elder species members who saw this change as positive rather than threatening. She was from the Corvian species and had served on the Council for 2 centuries. She had watched young species be exploited and had always felt uncomfortable with the system. Now she proposed a radical idea. Instead of fighting the independence movement, why not acknowledge it and create a new relationship based on actual cooperation? Her proposal was rejected by the majority, but it started conversations in private meetings across Council space. Dr. Matt Rodriguez was Earth's leading xenobiologist. He studied alien life forms and helped establish protocols for peaceful contact. But his most important work happened in secret. He coordinated with alien scientists who admired humanity's stance and wanted to support the independence movement. Together, they created communication networks that the Council could not monitor. Messages flowed between Earth and dozens of worlds, sharing ideas and strategies for resisting Council pressure without triggering military responses. The underground network grew quickly. Young species wanted what humanity had claimed for itself: the right to determine their own future, the freedom to make their own mistakes and celebrate their own successes. They were tired of being treated as children who needed guidance from elder species who had stopped innovating centuries ago. The network shared intelligence about Council military movements, warned each other about economic sanctions, and coordinated diplomatic strategies. Ambassador Hannah Pierce became humanity's unofficial liaison to the independence movement. She traveled to neutral space stations and remote outposts, meeting with representatives from species that could not openly oppose the Council. These meetings were dangerous. Council intelligence services monitored all traffic through major space lanes. Several species faced economic penalties just for having contact with human diplomats. But the meetings continued because the alternative was worse: accepting permanent subordination to species that no longer deserved their authority. Hannah never promised military support or advanced weapons. She knew that Earth could not defend every species that wanted independence. The Sentinels protected humanity's solar system, but could not project power across the galaxy. Instead, Hannah offered something more valuable: proof that standing up to the Council was possible. The story of Earth's defiance had become a symbol. If humans could do it, maybe others could too. The psychological impact was enormous. The Council tried multiple strategies to stop the movement. Economic sanctions were applied to the most vocal independent species. Trade routes were redirected to punish planets that showed too much autonomy. Council inspectors showed up unannounced, looking for violations of regulations that had not been enforced in decades. But these tactics backfired. Young species that had been neutral began to sympathize with the independence movement. The council looked petty and vindictive rather than wise and benevolent. 6 months after Earth's standoff, representatives from 11 young species met in secret. They drafted a document called the Declaration of Sovereign Rights. It stated that every species had the right to govern itself without external interference. It called for the council to be reformed into a true federation where all members had equal voices. The document was carefully worded to avoid directly challenging council authority, but the implications were revolutionary. If accepted, it would completely transform galactic governance. The declaration was leaked to the galactic media by an anonymous source. Within days, it was being discussed on 100 worlds. Public opinion polls showed surprising results. Even on some elder species worlds, younger generations supported the ideas in the declaration. They had grown up hearing stories about the Council's glorious history, but had also witnessed its failures and injustices. Many young aliens admired humanity's courage and wondered why their own species accepted subordination so easily. The Council held emergency sessions to address the crisis. Debates raged for weeks. Some members wanted to crush the independence movement with military force before it grew stronger. Others argued for political solutions and gradual reforms. A few, like Councillor Vrenna, suggested accepting the declaration and using it as a foundation for genuine change. But the elder species could not agree on any course of action. While they debated, the independence movement kept growing. Captain Ryan Mitchell, now promoted to admiral, led a small human fleet that patrolled the edges of independent space. His orders were clear. Humanity would not conquer or colonize. They would not impose their government on other species, but they would defend any species' right to choose independence if asked. Ryan's fleet had not fired on any council vessels, but their presence was a deterrent. The council knew that any military action against independent species might draw Earth into the conflict. That was a risk the elder species were not willing to take. Lieutenant Sophie Brooks had been promoted to commander and now trained new Sentinel operators. She taught them the philosophy behind the defensive network. The Sentinels existed to protect Earth, not to threaten the galaxy. Their power came from discipline and restraint as much as from weapons. A platform commander who fired too quickly was as dangerous as one who hesitated too long. Sophie's students learned to read sensor data, analyze threats, and make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between peace and war. The galaxy had fundamentally changed in less than a year. The Council still controlled vast territories and resources. The elder species still had more advanced technology in many areas, but their absolute authority was broken. Young species had seen that resistance was possible. They had watched Earth stand alone and survive. That example could not be erased or forgotten. 2 years after humanity deployed the Sentinel network, Ambassador Jack Peterson stood before a gathering that would have been impossible just months earlier. 23 species had sent representatives to a neutral space station to discuss forming a new alliance. They called themselves the Free Systems, and they wanted to create an alternative to the Galactic Council. Jack had been invited as an observer and advisor. Humanity's role was to inspire and support, not to lead or control. That distinction was important to everyone in the room. The meeting hall was designed to accommodate different species with different needs. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others required methane or ammonia atmospheres and attended through sealed environmental suits. A few existed as energy beings and communicated through specialized translation devices. Despite these differences, everyone shared a common goal. They wanted the freedom to govern themselves without council interference. They wanted trade agreements that were fair. They wanted to explore and innovate without asking permission from species that had grown comfortable and stagnant. The Delthian representative spoke first. Her name was scientist Kalara, and she had been part of the resistance movement from the beginning. She explained how Earth's example had changed her world's perspective. For generations, the Delthians had accepted their place as junior members of the Council. They had believed the elder species when told that experience and wisdom justified their authority. But watching humanity stand up to the Council had revealed a truth they had been avoiding. Authority had to be earned through current actions, not inherited from ancient history. The Zentari representative was an engineer named Foreman Dracus. His species had built the infrastructure that kept Council space functioning. They maintained the trade routes and constructed the stations where diplomats met. But they received minimal compensation and no recognition for their essential work. Dracus proposed that the free systems create their own trade network, one where labor was valued and compensation was fair. Several other species immediately supported the idea. They had all experienced similar exploitation under Council economic systems. Jack listened to each representative speak. They came from different worlds with different cultures, but their stories were remarkably similar. Join the Council and prosper, they had been told. Instead, they found themselves trapped in agreements that extracted their resources and limited their growth. The Council maintained peace, but it was the peace of stagnation. Innovation was discouraged because it might disrupt existing power structures. Young species were kept dependent rather than helped to reach their full potential. The debate shifted to what the Free Systems Alliance would actually be. Some representatives wanted a loose coalition where each species maintained complete independence. Others argued for a more structured organization with shared military defense and coordinated economic policies. Jack offered humanity's perspective when asked. Earth believed in cooperation without domination, shared goals without surrendered sovereignty. Any alliance that respected those principles would have humanity's support. Any organization that became another council would fail for the same reasons. Captain Ryan Mitchell attended the meeting as Earth's military representative. Several species asked about the Sentinel network and whether humanity would help them build similar defenses. Ryan explained that Earth would share defensive technology with species that genuinely wanted independence. But there were conditions. The technology could only be used for defense, never aggression. It could not be sold or traded to the Council or any hostile power. And each species had to demonstrate they understood the responsibility that came with such powerful weapons. Several representatives signed agreements on the spot. Dr. Lisa Crawford had spent the past year studying languages and cultures from across the free systems. She was preparing a comprehensive database that would help different species understand each other better. The Council had maintained similar databases, but they were filtered through elder species perspectives. Lisa's work let each species tell their own story in their own words. She presented her findings at the meeting, showing how much the free system species had in common despite their differences. They all valued family. They all created art. They all wondered about their place in the universe. The final agreement took 3 days to negotiate. The Free Systems Alliance would be a voluntary organization where each member maintained complete sovereignty. They would coordinate on defense against external threats. They would establish fair trade networks. They would share technology and knowledge freely rather than hoarding it for advantage. Most importantly, they would maintain the principle that had brought them together. Every species had the right to determine its own future without interference from others. Ambassador Jack signed the agreement on behalf of humanity. Earth would not be a leader of the Free Systems Alliance. They would be one member among many, with the same rights and responsibilities as everyone else. Jack explained humanity's philosophy in his signing speech. Earth had not defied the Council to become a new empire. They had fought for freedom, and freedom meant letting each species find its own path. The applause that followed was genuine and heartfelt. These species had found something rare in galactic history, a powerful ally that did not want to rule them. The Galactic Council's response was predictable. They declared the Free Systems Alliance to be an illegal organization. Economic sanctions were announced. Trade restrictions were imposed. Council military vessels began patrolling the borders between Council and Free Systems space. But the sanctions were less effective than the Council hoped. The Free Systems had resources the Council needed, and several Council species quietly continued trading with Free Systems members because the economic benefits were too good to abandon. Counselor Vrenna finally convinced enough elder species members to support limited reforms. The Council announced new policies that gave young species more representation and better trade terms. It was not the complete transformation that Vrenna wanted, but it was progress. She privately thanked Ambassador Jack for forcing the Council to change. Without Earth's defiance, the elder species would never have reformed anything. Sometimes comfortable systems needed to be shaken before they could improve. Dr. Amy Richardson published her research on plasma weapons and quantum communication systems. The papers were released to the entire galaxy, not just humanity or the free systems. Several council scientists contacted her with questions and compliments. They had been trying to solve the same problems for decades without success. Amy explained that innovation required freedom to fail and experiment. Council scientists worked under strict oversight that punished failure. Earth scientists were encouraged to take risks and learn from mistakes. That cultural difference had led to technological advantages. Commander Kate Sullivan reviewed the security situation from her office on Earth. The Sentinels continued their watch, never resting or becoming careless. Council probes still tested the boundary regularly, looking for weaknesses. Kate's team had detected 17 espionage attempts in the past year. All had been neutralized without violence. The message remained clear. Earth would defend itself but would not strike first. That discipline was what separated humanity from empires that ruled through fear. Admiral Chris Hayes commanded Earth's expanding fleet. More ships were being built every month as humanity spread out into the solar system and beyond, but every ship followed strict protocols. They could not claim territory that belonged to another species. They could not interfere with developing civilizations. They could not use their weapons except in self-defense. Chris had been military his entire adult life, and these restrictions sometimes frustrated him. But he understood their importance. If humanity became conquerors, they would betray everything they had fought for. President Nicole Davis had served through the most challenging years of human history. She had made the decision to decline the Council's invitation. She had authorized the Sentinel Network. She had guided Earth through the standoff and its aftermath. Now she prepared to leave office as her term ended. Her final speech was broadcast across Earth and to human colonies throughout the solar system. She reminded everyone that freedom required constant vigilance and regular sacrifice. The Sentinels protected Earth's borders, but humanity's values protected their soul. Lieutenant Sophie Brooks looked out from Platform 7 at the stars. She had been assigned to this post for 3 years now. Most days were routine. Monitor sensors, maintain systems, coordinate with other platforms. But she never forgot what the Sentinels represented. 1,000 warnings floating in the darkness, telling the galaxy that some things were worth defending. Earth's independence, humanity's right to choose their own path, the principle that power should serve freedom rather than suppress it. The galaxy had changed in ways no one predicted. The Council still existed but was diminished and reformed. The Free Systems Alliance was growing stronger each year. Young species were finding their voices and demanding respect. And at the center of all these changes was Earth, the world that had said no when everyone expected yes, the planet that had placed 1,000 warnings in the sky and meant every single one.